Alison Richardson is a landscape architect at Brown and Richardson Rowe, and she's going to be talking about the Big Dig in Boston and some of the good things and some of the things that maybe could have been better. And then she'll be followed by a presentation about the Overtown Expressway, and then the mayor of New Haven is going to talk about Route 36, a freeway stub that is in New Haven. Alison.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Alison Richardson, and I am a landscape architect. I am a native to Boston. Lived there all my life. Was born in Needham, which is adjacent. And I work in Boston, have worked there the entire time that all of this was going on. This is really an interesting project to come after that, after the movie in New Orleans, because some of the very same things that happened in New Orleans happen in Boston. The Big Dig, a great public project. I think it is a great public project for many, many reasons. It's amazing that it ever got built. It could have been better. It is changing every year. New things are happening. It is finished. It's been finished since about 2006. But, and it's also many, many more projects, for those of you who don't realize, than just downtown Boston. And I can get into a few of those. Historic overview. Again, this was, going to save Boston. The original Central Artery, $100,000 million, highway in the sky. Boston Globe, 1954, 2 years after I was born. Boston was really an aging, or was an aged, economically stressed city after the war. It really didn't, there was nothing going on. No buildings were being built. The waterfront piers were all collapsing. Everything was sort of going downhill. And they really wanted to invigorate the downtown and basically have economic development right where the action was. And a lot of that is along the waterfront, and bring people, into the city, but it also actually, just as the movie said, it brought people out of the city, because then they could come into the city easier than before. Building the elevated artery, the master plan was just after the war. There was actually going to be another highway that was never built. 1,000 structures were demolished, 20,000 people lost their homes, and unfortunately, even though it did improve traffic for a while, it completely cut off the downtown from the waterfront. This is a 1995 aerial of the Central Artery. You can see how close to the waterfront it is, some of the piers jutting out into the harbor. You can see down below the picture of how big it really was. And it was a dark, very, very noisy, dirty place, I will say, and very difficult to cross. 20 years after it was built, the traffic didn't work anymore. I would be scared if I had, at 16, I would be terrified when I first got my license. I'd have to get on the artery to go anywhere. Because once you got on, you could be on there for an hour and move about 100 feet. And it separated, said, downtown neighborhoods in the city, really unattractive views. And the solution was to put it all underground. And Tip O'Neill, for those of you who remember, when he was retired Speaker of the House, he still had enough power to get congressional approval for his last big work, which was the Big Dig. And if he hadn't been so powerful, I don't think we would have gotten the money from the feds. Why is this a great public project? 10 years of planning and politicking to pass the surface artery. 20 years to complete permitting, design, and construction. $15 billion final cost. A lot of that was inflation. $5 billion to keep streets and sidewalks open during construction. Our office was right on the Central Artery. So I experienced the amazing traffic construction that happened, and all the there would be a street this way one week, and the next week another. When that happened, that went on for years and years and years. Somehow it worked. 40 design and 114 construction contracts, 15,000 workers. They were everywhere. Construction workers just filled the city of Boston. So let's just keep going. The biggest, 300 acres of new open space, 45 new parks, 8 linear miles of interstate highway and tunnels, 150 cranes were working at peak construction. I'll never forget one day when I was looking out my window when I saw an 80-foot-long beam go into a tiny hole and just disappear. It was really quite extraordinary. The largest tunnel jacking project ever built in the U.S., the world's widest cable-stayed bridge, the Zakin Bridge, was part of this project. Completely transformed Logan Airport, and built a very beautiful new airport station as well. Urban improvements. This is one of the great things about this project was that it did reconnect downtown to the waterfront. Some people will think that hasn't really completely happened yet, but you have to realize that there were 50 years of construction that happened to turn its back on this, which essentially, it wasn't only the artery that cut you off, but everything else then turned either toward downtown or toward the ocean, toward the bay. And that is going to take many years to undo. And I think that's something that, managing expectations is something that I think is one of the biggest challenges of this project. It did increase land values. I can show you some 2010 study that the BRA, the Boston Redevelopment Authority, did that will show what's been happening. It definitely improved traffic, very much so. Logan Airport, it works much, much better. There's a brand new tunnel that goes from the west straight to Logan, so now we have 2 tunnels going to Logan, and that really did improve the airport, and they've done much better since then. Pedestrian connections have been improved. The air and light quality, and there was a really bad vermin problem because of this elevated artery, has been improved, and hazardous waste was removed. And another thing, which a lot of people don't know, is that the Boston Harbor Islands were added to the National Park Service partially because of Spectacle Island, which was a former dump in the middle of the harbor where 4 million cubic yards of hazardous excavate from the tunnel was dumped, and we made it into a park. And you can see that at the end of the show. The Big Dig created 45 parks and public plazas, some of them being the Wharf District Park, which is part of the Rose Kennedy Greenway, the Charles River Basin, which is a beautiful passive park along the river. I'm not going to talk about that, but it's very beautiful. Memorial Park expansion and Bremen Street Park and Greenways Trail, which are over 40 acres of new parks in East Boston, which people don't really know about, and Spectacle Island Park, 121-acre Boston Harbor Islands National Park. All of these happened because of this one project. The Rose Kennedy Greenway is about 1.5 miles long, and it's between the Central Business District and, as I said, the harbor. These are very early pictures to kind of sell the project. You can see the top, what it looked like previously, and then what it could look like. It didn't take a lot of publicity to get people excited about the change. It was really the money and the process. This was what was called the consensus plan. It took a lot of time and energy for everybody involved to come to a consensus plan for this downtown corridor. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges, because there were so many stakeholders and so much money involved, and it was so complex that it almost ended in paralysis. And some people think it did end in paralysis. It ended up in basically a landscape corridor with just a few building parcels. And the Globe critic wrote that the Rose Kennedy Greenway should be a 21st century complement to the Boston Common, a gathering place, a town center, a public ground. It can consume whatever Bostonians choose, an emerald necklace, a grand boulevard, a waterfront lawn. It is now none of these. But it is becoming some of these. because as anything, any design, any huge change like this, it's really transformative. And it transforms everything around it, and it then becomes transformed. So it's not a static, it certainly is not static. And I think if there's anything you can take away from this, some people might think it's a failed project, but actually it's changing every day. You can't make that, no, I don't think you can make that comment. Many people worked on it. These are just a few of the designers up above. I'm not going to read their names, but you can see the difference between when, I know this is a black and white picture, but there really wasn't any green, and then what it looks like, what it looked like just a few years ago, a couple of years after it was finished. One of the biggest challenges for this corridor after they took down the artery was to activate the space and you know, the people that are going to use it. How do you get people to use it? How do you get it to really be then embraced by the city? And what's really interesting is that as more and more of the adjacent properties are being developed, and they are being developed and have been developed, and as sort of all the, you know, the construction ended and you can finally go back downtown, the tourists have come back in groves, and this has become a really popular place for tourists, which I actually had never anticipated. I thought it would be, well, that's what it is now. Residents, as, you know, there were really no residents who weren't used to going there, but now people are, and sort of the workers are now coming in. There's lots and lots of food trucks, I think, which is sort of a national phenomenon, and all kinds of special programming. There's a fantastic website, actually, for the Greenway that has a schedule. That's one of the best publicity that the Conservancy, which is a private group that runs it, does, is this website. Anybody can go on it. You can see what's going on at any time on the Greenway. And it's very accessible and very well done. Here's some images. This is it's a very long corridor, as I said. This is the farthest north, right near the north end, which is an older, formerly it's still Italian-American, but it's being gentrified, has been for a while. And the Zachem Bridge, you can see at the top, which is Boston's new iconic symbol. And it's very green. So this is an area where there still are some development parcels that are going to happen, and they're actually have just been there are bids that are being considered right now for everything from a hotel to farmers market that's in a building, and there have been other proposals that failed in this part of the for development parcels. One was a YMCA, and another was a Boston History Museum. So there's been a little problem with getting people to want to build on the development parcels that we do have, because there's some expense to it to build over the tunnel that you know, in these times it's kind of difficult to assume extra cost. Here are some more images of the North End parks. With above is a special day. They have events all the time. There's a fountain. There's a trellis. There's lots of green space, and the North End community had a lot to do with this part of this part of the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and it actually the top part and the bottom, the north and the south end. This is the Italian-American North End, and the bottom is the Chinatown. Those two parks districts, I think, are the most successful, and I think it's because the community had the biggest involvement. This is the Wharf District Parks, which is, I kind of call it even though it's very beautifully planted and has beautiful plants, it's very passive in the sense that you just sort of walk through it. It's meandering. There's some sculptures that they're putting in, but it's a little bit like the doldrums. You sort of have a lot of excitement at the beginning and at the end, and then this is very quiet. It's more of an oasis. And more sort of a horticultural event, I would say. This is some images of the up at the north end where there's a fountain, and these pylons that change color at night. You know, I mean, some people like them. The fountain is very popular. You can see that they're computerized. I think they enliven the district. I don't know if people are going to love them 20 years from now. The fountain is a great success, especially with the tourists. And of course, all the abutters, all the places that now are turning in and looking at at the Greenway, all the rentals and, I mean, the square foot prices are all just gone through the roof. Here are some images of the Wharf District Park, the more passive area. There's kind of this is a sculpture that's been installed, which is fun. This is a form of activity that happens in Dewey Square. We had our own Occupy Boston for quite a few months, and one night they just cleared them out. But it brought a lot of activity to an otherwise pretty, not part of the Rose Kennedy Greenway that didn't have a lot of action. This is near South Station. So it was sort of exciting for a while. And then this is Chinatown Park, which is at the very southern end, which is really, it's more of a small, intimate corridor, and it's really very beloved by the community, and it's very pretty, and it's nice. People really, really do enjoy this part. A lot of bamboo. There's sort of a dry fountain, and it's very pleasant. Creating long-term value. It's sort of backwards what happened. This is 4 years after the Rose Kennedy Greenway was created. They decided to do a study of how to create long-term value. I'm sure there were other studies, but this was the BRA, and they wanted to actually see what were the trends before the artery was taken down, when it was still the central artery was there, and just before, and also during construction and afterwards. And you can see that in some of these charts, which are sort of boring, but the main point is that the Greenway District exceeded the central business district in value, and really has, like one would think, conventional wisdom, that has worked. And actually, I can say for myself that we no longer could. We were kicked out of our building, and now it's full of lawyers. All the designers are gone. Couldn't possibly afford it. So here's some more speculative bubble. There was a bubble before it was finished. Here's how higher commercial concentration drives a higher rate of growth. We can go back to any of these, but just to demonstrate that it has achieved that, and that.
Are you getting pretty close to the end?
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to stop?
Yeah. Well, you could.
Okay.
Just name something that this.
All right. What this says is that the city is really trying to activate the urban edge all along the edge, and that they have new requirements for any future development that has to happen. So that's one good thing. This is an image that shows.
I have one I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
You can't walk on the bridge.
You can't walk on the bridge.
You should never build a bridge in a city that you can't walk on.
Yeah, you can't walk on the bridge, no.
Okay, so is there any way that can be corrected?
No.
Is there anybody?
No.
The bridge is designed.
It's done.
Through traffic.
It's done, yeah.
Couldn't put up like those barriers and let people walk. Do they close it once a year? So
They do close it so you can walk on it.
okay, so if they do it once a year, all they have to do is add another day.
Yeah.
In 365 years,
Yeah.
you'd add one day every year, you'd
Well,
have the whole thing.
this is just to show you all the different projects that were the artery. It isn't just the main one. And I was
Yeah.
going to go through, I won't show you this, but this is Spectacle Island. I'm going to show you some just pretty pictures of Spectacle Island.
I've seen that from an airplane.
You can see it when you leave. This was my project. And it was a dump. And now it's 30,000 visitors came the first year
And you
that
can
it was
safely
open.
swim there.
And you can safely swim.
All right, yeah, we're going to have to.
Okay.
We have to give the other two
Okay.
a chance, and then leave time for.
If anyone wants to look later, you can see the rest.
Throw their questions at you. Okay. Antonio.
Oh, yeah, okay, sweet.
Hi, I'm Tony Garcia. I'm principal of the Street Plans Collaborative with Mike Leiden. Mike, raise your hand. Say hello to everybody. I'm also a community advocate in Miami. I have a blog called transitmiami.com, and my role here is really to discuss from the community point of view, different from the Big Dig, that it's a project that's already been completed. I-395 is a project that is still in the planning stage. It has been in the planning stages for 20 years. So I've gotten over the years to be able to see the arc of the project as the policymakers have engaged the public and what the preferred alternative has been over time. Just so for reference, I-395 is also called the Overtown Expressway. It's one of the shortest expressways in the United States, one of the shortest interstates. It's from I-95, which runs north-south, to the base of the MacArthur Causeway. So from right here to right here. And it's the main connection from the expressway and the mainland to South Beach. So it has a lot of traffic. It's got, I think, somewhere along the lines of 130,000 annual daily trips. So it carries a fair bit of our tourist dollars and our citizens to and from South Beach. You can't really understand the importance of I-395 without understanding how I-95 went through downtown, marching along north in the early 60s. This is the Midtown interchange, which is, this is an architectural rendering. It's a model. It's a model placed over an aerial photograph. I would consider it a reverse Steve Price image. So this is really a vision, like we just saw in the video, the American dream. This is what planners were considering at that time, without really thinking about the long-term consequences. There's a great article called Interstating Miami that points to that. The mantra of progress provided a rationale for expressway building without considering the byproducts of rebuilding and reform. The areas that were most impacted by the Overtown Expressway were in that little red Texas-shaped Overtown, and what is now called Overtown Park West and Omni. And it was the second oldest the second oldest continuously inhabited community in Dade County, second to Coconut Grove, and it was the largest place for African Americans to own land and to own businesses. At the time, in 1960, before the construction of the expressway in 1971, there were 30,000 residents in Overtown, and upon completion, there were 18,000. So it completely decimated the neighborhood. This is what the original inhabitants of Overtown, they were immigrants from the Bahamas. You can see their multimodal transportation there. And this is what we would know as Northwest 2nd Avenue in Miami. It was a pretty vibrant place. This was the cultural and economic center of the black community in Miami for 60 years before the expressway came to town. And it was considered the Harlem of the South. You had Josephine Baker and Nat King Cole and everybody who came to Miami at that time from the early, from the early 1900 to 1950, everybody stayed in Overtown. And so what happens when I-95 finally gets to Overtown, to this point where they decided to pinch and go out to Miami Beach, you see here the area in red that was impacted. And in an area that was 340 acres, you had over 30,000 residents. That's 100 units per acre. I mean, that's a density that we would all find acceptable. And there were low-rise houses. They were very small. You could see the pattern of the grid at the bottom where all the conch-style houses were built. These are, this is worker housing built by Flagler. So the density was there. It was a compact, walkable place. And then this came to town. This is the expressway moving forward. Overtown is over here. This is the Mount Zion Church. Even the I-95 couldn't demolish the church. But really, I mean, there was a lot of buy-in locally about using the expressway for urban renewal, and especially in this community also. This is what remains of that community. This is a figure ground just of the area next to the Midtown interchange, and you see that the pattern is totally different. Large blocks, mega developments. So what was once a very thriving street, something that we would be proud of, became this. And so for many in Miami, this is the image that we have of Overtown. This neighborhood belongs to the expressway. It's not the other way around. There's no way, I mean, look what it did to the street. It just truncates. And so after many years of no activity, there was no real planning for the corridor, there was no thought of how to rehabilitate, there was a lot of aesthetic review boards that would dance around the issue of the expressway without actually coming to the conclusion that the expressway was the problem. You couldn't paint it, you couldn't do, I mean, and they did. They tried painting and doing all sorts of crazy things with landscaping that never worked because the problem with the expressway was that it exists. So this is the result of this planning project went from 1996 to 2004, and they never actually reached a decision of what to do, and it's still ongoing actually now. But I want to go through the four alternatives so that you get a real idea of where we are here in Florida and specifically in Miami with regard to freeway teardowns and the whole notion of multimodal transportation. To start off, the Florida Department of Transportation, the report has four main alternatives. The first is sometimes the one that the residents like the best, so that's the no build. So the first alternative is the no build, and I know a lot of residents and property owners in the neighborhood that are starting revitalization that would love nothing more than for the whole project to just go away and for them to leave the area alone. This is the Florida Department of Transportation's preferred alternative. It's a higher expressway. It's something that they feel would allow light to get to the neighborhood. You see the basketball courts there. I mean, that's going to be a real great urban amenity, I think. And, the pros and cons are just sort of absurd. So the second alternative, their alternative 5 here, is the open cut. This is really it's a compromise for the community to get rid of the barrier that is the expressway and still allow FDOT to have its level of service and the amount of traffic that they want to go through. The open cut is the alternative that the community and civic leaders, the mayor, and current sitting commissioners prefer. This is the alternative that they're actually following through with, and they've gotten federal approval for and are moving towards that alternative. This is what they picture. This is what they will have us believe. I'm sorry, it's a very blurry image. One of the things as an advocate you learn is finding documents about public projects is so difficult. They're very dicey. They never want to actually give you the documents. But here you see, look, this is what they would envision. This is what they would have the community believe they're going to build. And you have beautiful little Aryan children over the water. There's no way that this is what this is going to look like. Absolutely not. What are they thinking? And here you see another view. I mean, they look at Sydney and they think, oh, this is a great idea. But, Sydney's expressway is over the water. It's not over the city. So there's obvious problems with this, and I don't see them building this for the amount of money that they say that they want to. They talk about Calatrava and, how much money it could save by not being an open cut. Going back to the open cut, they do the reverse. So where we just saw the beautiful, like Shangri-La, they show this open cut, which is what the community wants, and they do things totally coercive. They actually draw in graffiti, and there's barbed wire. I mean, it's totally, really? Are you really doing this? I mean, come on. The highest level of service is the tunnel, and I think, the Big Dig example has really, man, it's just scarred a lot of people. I have to tell you, policymakers do not want to embark on a $15 billion 30-year effort. So this is, while it might be something that would really totally get rid of the expressway, it's not something that we find realistic. And personally, I would like to see that money spread around to other modes. This would be a single-use investment and over $1 billion. So somewhere along the line, there was talk about, what this connection would look like if it wasn't a larger bridge, but something that was more at grade or a boulevard option. Here you see all the investment that's been going downtown, a performing arts center. So they want to put that expressway, this thing right here, next to a performing arts center that was just built a couple years ago. And so one of the ideas for the open cut that the community really thought was the way that it should go is to open up this land for development and leverage that to construct the cut or to fund its construction and to keep it going. And here you see another, just a great visual of the amount of urbanism that you can reclaim by getting rid of the expressway. So there's the four alternatives, right? Do nothing, build a higher elevated facility, which is what FDOT wants to do, build an open cut, which is, it's you know, not the best solution, but it's what the community has decided. And then there's the tunnel. But we're new urbanists, and we don't accept these as the alternative. So there was a fifth option that new urbanists came up with about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was the boulevard. And nobody thought in Miami that we could have a boulevard that would connect South Beach to the mainland with 130,000 or 180,000 average daily trips. But streets like this in Paris, in the Champs-Élysées, you easily get 180,000 daily trips on a street that is not, that doesn't take away from the urbanism and actually will add something to quality of life. So one of my colleagues at Dover Coal, Andrew Georgiadis, who really has been the leader in this issue, and since he was in school, was a part of the process of giving these alternatives. And one of his contributions are these really great renderings. Here you see the existing conditions of Miami. Here's downtown. This is I-95. This is that big interchange. This is a 1395, and I-9. This is the Overtown right here, actually. And so what he says is, forget about open cut, forget about the tunnel. What we really need are European-style boulevards. And I mean, it's pretty revolutionary in Miami to get rid of I-95, much less the Overtown Expressway over here. But so you make grand plans and then you bring it back down. So people say, well, I can see this happening, but maybe not the whole thing. And so that's what we tried to do. This is just a line drawing showing what the open cut alternative would look like if we drew it, if New Urbanists designed it, not the way that, this is an answer to their renderings, really. And so this is the existing conditions looking out. There's the historic Freedom Tower, the new Adrian Arts Center. You're looking towards Miami Beach right now. And this is what it could look like. And so, there's no graffiti. There doesn't have to be. If we design it correctly, it will look how we want it to look. Here's another shot of that in color. And so, really, the genesis of the idea is of the pedestrian, space, reclaiming that space for pedestrians and subverting the car. And it comes from precedent. These streets handle far more levels of automobile traffic and pedestrian traffic and cyclist traffic than their elevated bridge alternative, which is not going to have a pedestrian path or bicycle path. Which would you rather live next to? Which would you rather invest next to? And right now, as I said before, the community is really they don't want anything to happen with this project. If nothing happens, then they can continue revitalizing their neighborhood. This is a building that laid dormant for years, and now it's a gallery and a bar at the bottom floor. The hipsters have arrived. When the hipsters have arrived, it's time to do something. This is a colleague of mine, Brad, who he's an investor in the neighborhood. He's a developer, and he's taken to the streets to paint weeds on the street. He calls weed bombing. I mean, things are happening on the ground there, community gardens, but you always see the expressway. It's an ever-present reminder of what happened to this neighborhood, and that really the neighborhood can't restitch itself without getting rid of the expressway. That's this is the closest thing that they have to a nice main street, and see how far it is still. Hollywood even took notice. This is a recent Rock of Ages was filmed on one of our streets, and they reconfigured the street to make it a two-way with on-street parking. This is usually 4 lanes in one direction. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, in 1999, I went on a State Department-funded trip with...
Is that who paid for it? I could never figure out who did.
Yeah, well, maybe it was the CIA. But secret agent Mayor John DeStefano and I was mayor of Milwaukee at the time, we went to India and educated the Indians on how they should develop their cities. It was completely ridiculous because neither of us really knew what we were doing there. And I ended up sitting next to the mayor of Calcutta, who was a communist, but a really good communist. Anyway, we had a great time together there and became friends. And he has a big project in New Haven, which is controversial, but he has the courage to come here and present what they're trying to do to this skeptical audience. Thanks.
I mean, are there any other elected officials in the room, or am I the only one? Thank you. In a room full of planners, God help us. Thank you, Alison. Tony, so young and so cynical. You don't think the little Aryan children will be playing with sailboats under the underpass? It's right next to the homeless encampment. We have it all the time in New Haven. So, anyways, here we go. We had a committee at City Hall decided what to name this. It's a dream come true. It's actually from a title of a campaign brochure. This is a 1959 Democratic Town Committee campaign brochure for the re-election of Dick Lee, great American mayor. And before talking about 2012, I really don't want to talk about highways at all. I want to talk mostly about why we make decisions, how we make them, and that the infrastructure is incidental to people. Interestingly, this wasn't about an argument for transportation. It was an argument for slum removal. That's why New Haven pursued massive highway building, to remove the slums. It was called, we all remember what? Urban renewal. Thank you there. And this is what urban renewal was. Some people saw it as a problem. Jane Jacobs saw it as a problem in organized complexity. But other people decided it had to be something else. And it became this, which was clearing out of a highway right-of-way that was built, which you saw as the dream that came true. And since we were on steroids at the time in the United States, this east-west corridor was soon complemented by a north-south corridor, which took out most of the retail district of the center city. Interesting in the brochure, although Dick Lee, who was mayor for 16 years in New Haven, was president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, great mayor, denied ever saying this, but their comment was, as promised, 42 acres of New Haven's worst slums have been cleared and are being replaced by a thriving new community. Slums have passed into history. Slums have not passed into history. And I just say one piece on this. There's a woman I know who owned 554 East Street that was cleared. Her name was Lena Colasano DeStefano. And she had, on the first floor, she and my Aunt Ann and her family, my Aunt Josie on the third floor, and my family, 4 households, were on the second floor. We weren't quite sure and didn't know we lived in a slum, but we were part of relocation. Interestingly, 2 years after the house, my grandmother's house, was taken down, of the 4 households, only 1 remained in New Haven as we all went out. Now, having said that, I just want to say this. It's people that matters. And so this is an advertisement. At the end of the day, while infrastructure matters, frankly, the most important things, I think, in making vibrant cities have to do with schools, connecting people to work, public safety, and being open, welcoming communities. Quick advertisement to put this in perspective. Who is this guy? This guy got a steal in naming rights almost 300 years ago for 400 books, 526 pounds of clothing, and a portrait of King George he had named after him. Yale University. This is Elihu Yale, who never visited New Haven, but is now my largest employer with 13,000 employees, and part of the reason why we're removing a highway. I like to look myself. This, if you can see it, is the Yale campus when it came. In 1717. It did not start in New Haven. We got it. We put up £1,000 and, of course, a 1,000-year tax agreement to get them there. This was Yale in 1940. I can just show this. And actually, the little open space in the bottom is where the highway went through. The reason why I put this in 1940, New Haven did a master plan by Felix Rodeval, French guy, pretty well-known guy doing this. But it actually began the basis of the parkway system that became the interstate highway system. But the reason why I put this up is because this is what they missed, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback and look at this. This is what they missed that was going on inside the city. Today, the campus looks something like this. Why is this at all relevant? In 1960, the university had a budget of $43.5 million. 17% of it was the School of Medicine. Today, the School of Medicine is 44% of the university's budget, $1.2 billion out of a $2.7 billion budget. The other thing that they missed in the 60s is in the 1970s of occupations in our city, 26% were manufacturing, Today it's 8%. Going back to 1970, 21% of the jobs were eds and meds. Today it's 42%. My largest taxpayer is a real estate development company today that hosts life and bioscience and pharmaceutical companies. Didn't exist when I became mayor. They missed what was happening and what was going on around them. They were more, in fairness to them, doing the best they could, looking back instead of looking forward to see what was there. So the interesting thing about this picture, I expanded it a little bit. Building number 3, which was there, which is a regulated utility, is now the home to a host of life, bioscience, and pharmaceutical companies. Buildings 4 and 7, which is after they tore down all the retail businesses, they built these. Of course, they built them on this dead end that they created, so they quickly collapsed, and of course, Yale bought them. Project number 6, which was built as a retail project, closed, and is now a community college downtown. And number 5 is what we're removing at this time. This is what it ended up looking like, and you see what it did. To the left is the Central Business District, and behind it the Central Campus. To the right is the whole med school area and the city's central train station. On the other side of this, just looking down the way, is when they just decided for the heck of it, even though we're not going to build a highway, let's keep clearing the land. And they did clear the land. And of course, the trees you see in the middle, if you notice, they're horizontal on this slide. They're the old street trees. They're the artifacts. They're the old street trees of the streets that were ripped up. So what did we do? We started to emulate Stalin. And basically what we decided to do was remove the highway. And this is only just a study that was done, how we'd fill the space. And basically take back 12 acres in our downtown. I have virtually no vacant space in my central business district at this point. It's rebuilding the street grid fundamentally and going back to what was there. The first phase of it is removing several highway exits, closing the main highway, and going down to 2 urban boulevards on either side, elevated crosswalks, bike lanes. We got 125 exceptions from Connecticut Department of Transportation in order to build this, as we negotiated with the 7 parts of CONDOT on one side, and on the other side we had people like you who were telling us what we should do. 2 things intersected to make this happen. Tiger 2, which is funding the construction. It's all designed. It starts in January of next year. This thing happened, which is it's going to be a pharmaceutical company. One of the unfortunate things we've been unable to reconcile is in the 60s they built these monster blocks. It truly was Stalinist, if you thought about it. You know, like, where's the front door? No, and the facial walls had no windows, and, you know, I guess they were less optimistic times. The people were going to come in or something. In dealing with, frankly, elevations and scale has been a problem with us, and knitting this back together. This is the second phase, which is on the other side of it. And I put this up here because none of you will know what this is. It was interesting to me because I felt when I did this PowerPoint really unfair about critiquing the guys and gals in the 60s about doing this. Yale, after 300 years, is going to be building another campus. It's only its second in 300 years. This is Yale in Singapore. They're actually building a liberal arts college called with the National University of Singapore. China has decided they need a liberal arts college. And I was also struck in something. If you saw Apple quarterly results, Apple that we all purchased, record doubled their sales in the first quarter of this year. 45% of the sales were in China. And the interesting thing to me is they didn't even classify East Asia as a separate market until 2 years ago for their products. For me, this is sort of what I'm looking forward to, thinking about what does that mean for us. So anyways, I just leave with 3 admonitions and be done so we can talk to each other. I'm sure you've had Ed Glazer speak at one of these. Maybe you must have had, right? I would have been disappointed if you didn't. It would have been such a cliche if you hadn't. Triumph of the City made a good point, though. You know, he said, don't invest in poor places, invest in poor people. And I think that is true. Never lose sight of that. I think it's really clear when you think about these things to sort of know where you've been, but try to make the best guess about know where you're going, and that is not easy stuff. That's an art, not a science. And two last things. none of us have to accept what doesn't work, and none of us should let the perfect be the enemy of the good. John, I am down. I moved us along. Thank you. We're going to have a quiz when we're done.
All right. So I already asked Allison a question about the bridge, and if I lived in Massachusetts, I would demand that they figure out how to put sidewalks on that bridge. But the other thing about the Big Dig, in hindsight, did anybody ever consider just not doing the road and just putting a surface like Anthony was talking about? Did that ever come up, or was that would have been too weird at that time?
No, actually, even worse, there was a tunnel and they were filling the surface with roads. So there wasn't even the green space.
So nobody ever thought of
It was even
cutting
worse
it.
than,
Because,
yeah. Because it was a transportation project.
you've seen the one in Seoul, South Korea, where that had 160,000 cars a day, and they just eliminated the road. There's 2 surface lanes on each side of the Chechong River. So they just got rid of it entirely. But that never came up in the Boston Big Dig.
It might have, but I don't remember hearing it because...
Okay, so now we have the Seattle Big Dig, which is going to cost about $9 to $11 billion, and that's just at the beginning of the process for the Alaskan Viaduct. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because that one, you remember your former colleague was pushing that idea. And it'll be interesting to see, because everything you know about this is going to be relevant to them. So you may get some work out of this from Seattle. So that'll be big dig too, and everybody in the United States will get to pay taxes to pay for that one. All right, Anthony, you want to tear down the freeway, but it sounds to me like it's the Jane Jacobs constituency alone. Is there an elected official in Miami that's even talking about doing what you want to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, former Mayor Manny Diaz, who was a leader in a lot of the urban issues that we all love, thought that the right option for I-395 was the open cut. Well, he was actually pushing originally for the tunnel.
Is anybody pushing the boulevard?
Nobody's bought into the boulevard. And we were just at a Peter Katz session where he was talking about a financing mechanism. He said Florida just isn't ready for this. I think this is the same with the boulevard concept. It's going to take a while for our leaders to become accustomed to it. But one of the sitting commissioners right now, Mark Sarnoff, in the last election, we sent him a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, which is the option that you support? And he supported the open cut. So there is support on the ground.
So there's a dialogue, and they don't have any money to do what they're about to do, right?
They don't have enough money to do any of the options. So a lot of people in the community say...
So you still have time to talk about it and think about it.
Right. Well, people say that it's just not going to happen.
So your weird radical ideas could someday become the plan.
Hopefully. Well, the element working against the boulevard is that they just spent $2 billion on a port tunnel. We're digging in this port tunnel. This is our version of the Big Dig. And the whole purpose of the port tunnel is to funnel traffic onto I-395. So the likelihood that they just spent $2 billion and that they're going to tear down the expressway to put it at grade is unlikely.
Okay, then the final question for you, for me anyway, is what would add the most value to the community? I know what you think, but is that question ever put out there?
What would add the most value is the boulevard option. I think most people would agree that that's but it doesn't address.
But
there's
the
never
DOT doesn't decide
the DOT
things
won't even.
They don't look at that. They just
yeah.
look at congestion.
Well, you look at the pros and cons list. It doesn't come up. It's like urban revitalization, land for development. But then the cons list is like, oh, you lose the sight lines of the city in the
Okay,
car.
Mayor. All right, Mayor. All right, so at least the drawings look good and all that, but they look better than what was there when you just look at the raw cut. But you've still got a grade separation going all the way to the parking lot. So the cut is there. You've got you've got a couple of bridges going over it. But why not just remove all the grade separation? Why wasn't that an option?
Yeah, the problem is there were buildings built at the new grades. And the other unfortunate thing is when you built the highway, instead of putting front doors on the highway, people put back doors onto the highway and basically created sheer curtain walls that separated and actually do something you wouldn't want on a campus. So I think the challenge is actually, I'm much more interested over time, is creating the street grid again and through streets. And we'll be able to do that. I think the mediating factors will be corners. Corners are great things, you know, to do, and try to create gateways at corners of the buildings.
Okay, then one other thing on that. In these struggles, I know from my own experience where we tore down a freeway in Milwaukee, it's a constant battle how far you let the freeway, the world of the freeway, come into the city. Like right now, the St. Louis Cardinal Stadium has these ramps coming in. It's it's like, if you look at it from the air, it looks like it's octopus strangling the stadium in the street grid of St. Louis. It was totally unnecessary. I mean, the Wrigley Field doesn't have any high level streets anywhere near it. And so the battle of, it's the street, the city that's dominant. But these battles go on and on. The ramps in a place like Detroit run wherever they want. You know, they just go deep into the city. So here you've got this, the freeway you have right now, the Dickley Highway, amounts to a half-a-mile long ramp. And so the battle, one of the battles you have is how far back can you push that? If the Connecticut DOT wants a ramp that takes care of their queuing problem, instead of doing it in the city, they could just have more space on their own freeway and then have the urban start. And in Chicago, all but except Ohio Street, all of the connections, and there's a lot of them, like every other block, all of the connections on the Kennedy Expressway in downtown end immediately. Within 5 feet of, you're right up next to the freeway, you come on to Jackson Boulevard. Jackson Boulevard is exactly the same dimension 20 blocks east as it is right off the freeway. As soon as you get off the freeway, and you get off the freeway right next to the freeway, it's urban. The freeway, the infrastructure of the freeway is done. And it works just fine in a place with a freeway with 200,000 cars a day. So the one thing, if I could erase your plan and do it, it'd be to push that stuff as close as you can possibly get it and make it as much like streets as you possibly can. And if there's any way you could still adjust it, I'd fight that battle if I were you.
You know, bring the check too, John. So I mean, it becomes no, seriously, because it becomes a choice, because there's an I-95, I-91 interchange, and then an overpass over Metro North Amtrak main lines into New York City, between New York City and Boston. So they end up defining the project and pointing to a fact. That's why I said, you know, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There's lots of things I'd like to do, but you know, it was sort of like when Father Hewitt let my sister into parochial school and not me. He said to my mother to take, you know, half loaf is better than none. Even though I was the nun, and well, not that kind of nun. But I mean, you know, so, you know, today you take a win today and go home tomorrow and fight again. We'll fight another day.
Okay, well, sometimes that's the case, where, you know, you have to minimize the bad stuff and maximize the good stuff.
And you got to look at this. And you know what's amazing to me, listen to everybody here, and you guys must all know this. You start these projects like 15 years ago, and where they end up is very, very different. I mean, for instance, you know, I just see it in our project, the sensitivity to street smarts and to non-vehicular activity was small 15 years ago. And CONDOT never would have let us do this 15 years ago. And if it wasn't for the recession of 2008 and Tiger, we wouldn't even be here in New Haven. So I think things like CNU are good, and what you guys do about continuing this dialogue about, you know, picking up our game.
Well, we don't think there should ever be freeways in big cities at all. You know, there's always a better way to handle it that's better for economically and socially and everywhere else. Anybody have any questions? John Anderson, and then you. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
my remarks should be delivered with all due respect, and that's usually the preamble to what the fuck are we doing? Now, I'm a builder, a developer, I'm a person of low character, but I'm also a previous inmate of a DOT. I get 3 years in doing access management. The street stuff is not that hard. The money side of it is not that hard, except it's very difficult to get outside this end. I agree with your point.
What money's not hard?
We should not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But I was on the design workshop, I was walking that site, I saw the things coming forward, and I gotta tell you, we should not let the lane be the enemy of the perfectly adequate.
No, it's again, it's same thing. That's great. That's not the choice here. And so you're entitled to your point of view, but you got no money on the table, man. And at some point, you got to move these things. And so I guess, I don't know exactly what you're saying or what troubles you about the project per se.
You're blowing all the tax base that you could have had on that corridor.
Sorry, what?
You're blowing the tax base you could have had on that corridor.
That's not true. You've got built-in sites in all of those sites. So again, what's wrong with I mean, you just showed us on Tremont travel lanes that we're in the same number as what we've got here. I don't know what Tremont is carrying there. We're carrying about 40,000 cars a day on this things. You've got 10-foot wide lanes. You've got no shoulders on one side. Again, so I don't know specifically.
Crossings with 90-foot radii, it's crap. It's, in the most simple term, it's a lousy legacy. And you're going to have difficulty capturing the value of
Okay, we may be, if we have
Point of
time
view.
afterward,
Like
we
you
can
said,
get
you were
into more
selling a
detail
full
about the
character.
details, but just to point out something, the mayor actually fought on one detail, and that was the lane widths, and got it down to 10 feet. So, which also indicates that you have a knowledge of how to you can know how to fight the DOT. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. Let's go to the next question here.
Well, this is, I guess, generally the mayor, I'm from Providence, and we just relocated our highway out of downtown, Route 195 interchange, which was about 250,000 cars a day. And congratulations on Chief Esserman, our loss regime. Is the land use after the highway moved? You've got 40 acres of land roughly, about 20 acres of developable land afterwards. And then the problem is we have Brown University that would like a nice big slug of that, as they should have, in my opinion. But there's a problem with institutions and being downtown and their 300-year, in Rhode Island, it's actually part of the state constitution that runs. So, did you have any issues with Yale?
There's two ways of looking at it. First of all, the great thing about Providence, if you're going to be a city, be the only city in the state and also be the capital city. It is really it's really a preferred thing to be. I don't know.
Yeah,
look,
Connecticut treats their cities like dirt. I mean, no offense to Connecticut.
I'm not the governor. I tried. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
You know about that. Anyway, no. I mean, look, it's like embrace what you are. So, Yale's only the fourth largest taxpayer, not the largest. But I'm also not lost on where most of the salaries in my town are earned, right?
Come and talk to our governor.
I thought what you guys did last week was a good step.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the crazy ideas that the people that look at freeways that advocate them, the idea you can't get someplace without a grade separation. Like if you have an institution like a hospital, the Mount Sinai Hospital on Upper Fifth Avenue at 97th or whatever, there's no big road. You have to go through the congestion of Manhattan to get anywhere near it. So the idea that you have to have a straight shot in, I never understood that. One of the things that John Anderson had, because we had a previous conversation about this, is why a developer of a site would want something as obnoxious as a grade separation coming right into their building when they have a beautiful city around them, like New Haven, with Yale and the center thing and all that.
Well, in our case, it was because they had built the access to the hospitals below grade under that garage.
And they valued that.
Well, they just built it for this huge complex, and so they valued that. I mean, and this may sound like a small reason, but locative vivarium sometimes bringing in the animals.
Okay. All right, Peter Park, former city planner in Milwaukee and Denver, and now at Harvard for a few more weeks till he does something else.
Anybody have an idea what I should do? Let me know.
Yeah.
Mayor, I just have a question. Having worked for a great mayor, and having...
So is Dick Lees. What are you saying about me?
Well, clearly this issue of and I've been looking into this question about the opportunity of taking more freeways down. And it's pretty clear to me that mayors are the people that are going to make this happen. That this campaign of freeways that was created, that has had such a residual effect and still does today, I really believe that it's going to be mayors like you that are going to make this change. I don't expect the federal government to do it. I don't expect state government to see this. So I guess the question I have for you is, what does the discussion among mayors, among your peers look like in rethinking this? Obviously, you all can't say, well, we don't want the money. Of course we want the money. But in the question of, well, how should we use this money that is available? And what advice can you give for us in reaching for mayors in an effective way to start a new campaign?
Look, you guys know this. Every day you make choices about what you do and what you don't do because of limited resources. And frankly, where things like this rank, for me, are below making sure that public school children graduate with the capacity to enter and persist and graduate from college. Keeping the city safe is a second thing. And a huge mismatch I see emerging in my city, but I think in lots of other places, is the skills required by the kinds of work that exist in America are very different than the kinds of skills that a lot of people in the workplace have right now. That said, we do get to make capital expenditures sometimes, even though most of these are, Look, I've never proposed building a stadium in New Haven. I've never proposed building a convention center.
A money-losing convention center.
I don't know what this one does. I mean, my proposition is always, although the Marlins Stadium I hear is very nice, I don't know. So, I mean, I think it's choices, and I think sometimes, we like, guys and gals in my job like those big shiny buildings. And you really got to measure whether they build.
Okay, we have time for
Wait. Is
one
there
or
a
two more.
conversation with your peers? Are the other mayors talking about this?
Not in large numbers that I perceive. No. It's not relevant for a lot of them.
Okay, Bill, and then you're next. And then I think that'll have to do it because we'll be out of time. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious of how folks are running into this nationally. In New Orleans, there's a huge problem in the African-American community. And that highway that you guys saw that showed went down I-10, it went down the African-American neighborhood and ruined it. Well, the idea of putting the boulevard in, African-American community is afraid that that process will be dominated by white folks and they will be displaced by bringing the highway down. They don't like the highway where it is, but they feel which will happen in the future. And that's one of the problems we're dealing with. And of course the issue is, how do you take down that kind of a highway in that kind of an area and make sure gentrification doesn't take place as much as black community fears it will.
Do you think you can stop the market?
I'm not sure. That is a huge problem.
I think it'd be more directly relevant to Anthony's project, where you actually have a poor neighborhood that is around the freeway. The residential neighborhood pretty well got wiped out, right, John?
It's gone.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good point. Let's get this question here.
And John, the Dallas folks aren't cornered you about this, but unbelievably, Dallas is going to build a new freeway on top of the other freeways through the center of Dallas. And,
Get your motors running. Yeah, it's.
So my question to you guys, and it's mainly the mayors, is, in our respect, I mean, it's unbelievable there's mayors out there that are actually thinking about taking up freeways. But how would we approach our mayor and try to get him as progressive thinking as you guys to try to stop this thing?
If you look in that blue 26-page book that we put out as basically as a way to help people understand the Institute of Traffic Engineers Urban Street Guide, there's a phrase in there that says infrastructure that in the urban context should add value to the place where it's built, that like a rule. And if everybody knew what they knew now when the Dick Lee Highway was built, they wouldn't have built it because it didn't add value to New Haven. You know, I mean, that's the approach I would take with the mayor of Dallas. It's not going to help Dallas to do that. It's going to spoil the real estate value in the corridor where it's built, and it's not going to help the city of Dallas. And congestion isn't the biggest problem that Dallas has. The most successful city in America in fighting congestion, without question, is Detroit. They do not have a problem with congestion. They built every freeway. They made every super block that the planners wanted, and they don't have a problem anymore. But that's not the kind of outcome that Dallas should want. Yeah.
I think back to the question on gentrification, you could look at the New York Avenue station, which is the station that was added to the Red Line in Washington, D.C., which was exactly that issue. And they did a great job working with D.C. government and figuring out what taxing structure would allow that neighborhood. They had the same exact issue and did it very successfully. So there are great examples, particularly when we look at transit. But that's one particularly.
Yeah, Harriet Trigoni and others did a really great job on that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of implementing it, yeah. So, well, what happened there, correct me if I'm wrong, they not only had a cross-subsidy program to have affordable housing, but they also made sure that there was high density and a variety, diversity of housing types, so that even without the cross-subsidy, there would be a cross-section of incomes in the neighborhood.
And they put a cap on how much the tax rate could increase for the residential areas around it for the next 20 years.
Wow, that sounds that'd be hard to do in most jurisdictions. D.C. plays with a different deck of cards than most cities. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah.
You can't give tax abatements to a certain neighborhood over other neighborhoods?
No, you can't, but you can do it by development, certainly, right? So you functionally do. We do it all the time, by who we choose to give tax abatements to for developments. I'm 78% rental housing, and a third either Section 8 public or project-based subsidized. So you end up frankly, redlining creating affordable neighborhoods. So you do. I mean, I think when I said the market is hard, I still see when things start to move, it goes at it. It moves. But, I mean, maybe Washington did something I'm not aware of.
All right, and the final question goes to the back of the room.
Kind of comment on the point about New Orleans, because I was born and raised in that neighborhood and still on property in that neighborhood. And I will be moving back to that neighborhood. I think the fear is very complex in New Orleans, because after Katrina, the people who rented in that neighborhood moved out, and the neighborhood is slowly being gentrified because it was largely rental property. So you're feeling the pressure of gentrification that was brought on by Katrina, and then they're feeling the pressure of everyday living, like utilities. Utilities are extremely high in that neighborhood. It's historic. The homes are old. When you have a 100-year-old home, it's $200 a month to heat, or $400 when you take a fine home. So the people who still own the homes, the minorities who still own the homes there, were probably displaced in terms of not only, homes that they came back, but also work. My brother lost his job as a result of Katrina. The school went away, he lost. So they're balancing other things, and now it's another pressure that they see. So I think it's going to be largely education from people who look like them. For instance, like when you have knowledge, you can come in and say, no, it won't be a bad thing, but you have to learn to balance all of the economics. So maybe there might need to be incentives, and the city can do it by making it a district. You can give them incentives where maybe, or team up with utilities, where the utility rates, or reduce, so they get some kind of rebate. There's got to be a combination of things that encourage people to keep those homes, because it's easy to ditch them.
Yeah.
It's very easy to ditch
We're doing, along with New Orleans Foundation and the Treme, various neighborhood associations, we're doing a series of presentations. Like Norm Garrick is going to be coming there later to talk about the traffic situation. And we had Jackie Grimshaw come down from Chicago and talk about how she thought it would affect the community. But there's one guy in particular I'm thinking about bringing down there. Is Lance Freeman, who's a professor at Columbia and has done a lot of work about gentrification. The good thing about gentrification is that then money flows into the building stock that you need at some point, or else it's going to fall down. The bad side is that it puts price pressure on it. But he's done a study that shows that people who already live in a neighborhood who do not have high incomes are more likely to stay when the neighborhood is going up than they are when the neighborhood is falling apart. That there are other factors that cause people to move, like they don't want to get shot, or there's all kinds of reasons. There's no jobs in the neighborhood. So it's actually the existing low-income people in a neighborhood under Freeman's study show they're more likely to leave when things go downhill when things go uphill. So, anyway, you're exactly right, though. If there's not a complete discussion about those issues, there's so much suspicion. The people in that neighborhood have been screwed over so many times, so many ways over the years, that they're very suspicious of any change. Yeah. Oh, Norm Garrick. Sorry for dropping your name.
I have a question about the New Haven project. I've been looking at this project for quite a while, and I think it's a really difficult project.
He's from Storrs, Connecticut.
Storrs, Connecticut. To conceptualize what is going on, because when you have a freeway like that, like in Miami, and you can see this big object, and you take it down, you understand the implications of that. In New Haven, we have this trench that separates the city into parts, obviously separates the city. The question is, what is it we're trying to do in New Haven? And what we're trying to do is what John said, is about moving the highway character out of New Haven and put it back where it belongs, not in New Haven. The problem that I'm having is I keep looking at the renderings from the city and I do not understand how that is an improvement over what we have now. We keep arguing about lane width, about number of lanes, about all of those things. I've not heard anybody explain why we're spending all this money to make a change, because it doesn't seem like it's an improvement. It's changing the character.
Well, it's because it's not just a highway project. I think if it was just taking it out, it's sort of what I was making an observation about the Big Dig, is you do have this wide open linear pathway, and it seems to me it's finding its way for it to be used. Very much what this is about is enabling growth in the corridor right-of-way, which is to say putting buildings with employers in an area that's our highest demand for real estate. See, that section of land just happens to be like waterfront property for us. So this would be less relevant, I agree with you, if we didn't have a perspective on what was going in there. So the first issue of the relocation of a pharmaceutical in there is a big deal, because in the end, the connection, I agree the space is important, but more important is that there are people who are living and working there. If you look at Storrs, your own, Yukon, what's going on there right now, you're trying to create in central Storrs by introducing residential and retail and structured parking center. You're trying to create a center. We have that center with the med school and the central campus on either side. We have a downtown that has one of the lowest residential vacancy rates in America. I've got huge demand for housing and rental commercial space, and what animates this is ultimately people. And that's why I can't get particularly excited. Pay attention to lane width, but how's this different if you're going to be just like Dick Lee in 1960 and showing another piece of infrastructure? At the end of the day, and I'll say this again, none of this matters if kids aren't getting education, the place isn't safe, And if there are uses there that people want and have a reason to want to be there. So what animates it is that, is people.
But that's exactly the point. I think we are having the same vision, but it's an understanding of what works and what doesn't work is what you was trying to get across.
I'm sorry? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, by the way, we actually have 5 more minutes. I was wrong about the time. The session goes for 5 more minutes. I blew it. So, okay.
No, what I'm saying is your vision sounds like what is the vision of everybody in here, but what people here are saying is that there are infrastructure that works to get to your vision, and there is infrastructure that doesn't work. And what the city keeps showing is not going to give you the vision that you're talking about. And I think that's what the fundamental argument is about. But that's a long discussion.
No, you don't say something. Wait a minute. You don't say something. Hold on. You know, first of all, it's not my vision. So I can say this again. This is why this point of market, I mean, I keep coming back to issue of market. To have discussions of design without engaging market is a rather curious thing to me, and one that, to me, is I don't want to, I find less valuable to do. So what is, so if I could just finish the statement.
Let me try.
So if I could just finish the statement. I think what very much drives it is the demand for space in that area.
Yeah, see, I mean, I think what's happening here is when we've dealt with these issues in other places, like the Embarcadero in San Francisco, the Central Artery, the West Side Highway in New York, for the DOTs, their standard model is they're worried about throughput, congestion, all that stuff. And so they have parameters that don't allow for the other things to even happen. And you get to this situation where, oh, there's plenty of time to talk about it, then all of a sudden, magically, boom, too late to change it, you know, and you go through that, and it happens almost everywhere. And this is just my observation, John, and I don't mean this as an attack on you at all, but the Connecticut DOT hasn't figured out yet that there's other purposes for these streets than just moving vehicles. So they have their vision, and then the city is sitting there with, you know, not having a lot of money. The Connecticut has control over more money. Then you have the feds with their money. And it's really hard for your own people to challenge them because they have the goal.
I don't feel like a victim, quite honestly, and powerless in all this. I happen to think the design is a good design to move traffic through that area, to accommodate the development, to reknit the neighborhood together. I think like a lot of enterprises we do, you know, everybody applies their own standards and expectations. But I think on some, in terms of what my residents care about and feel are strong, it's a good project. I understand other people may feel differently about elements of it. But I'll tell you, John, one thing. I think if you ever get a mayor, to go to your point about Houston, it feels like a victim, it's time for a new mayor.
Yeah.
Or governor or president.
Yeah.
With regard to the state DOTs, then should any effort be spent to try and change the mindsets of the state DOTs? Or is it completely
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in process. If you look at the Federal Highway Administration has embraced the Institute of Transportation Engineers, CNU, Urban Alternative Street Guide, and Texas DOT adopted it, whether they're not fully implementing it yet, obviously, and they're not even paying attention to it in your case. But we've got to try to change the metrics so that, and the purpose. I mean, if the purpose of road building is just to move vehicles and you use the same standard whether you're in a rural area of Iowa or in New York City, the city's going to look like an obstacle, and you're going to end up with lots of problems. So we're trying to change that. And what I didn't mean that you should be a victim. I'm just saying that the way the cards get dealt when the DOTs are using that sort of old methodology that we don't like, the equation, the power equation, looks a lot different than it does than, say, in Canada, where in Vancouver now they can't have an arterial street with lane widths more than 9 feet 10 inches. None. And they just ripped off the ramp. They took one lane off the ramp that used to be, there were 2 lanes on the big bridge over to the north side of the river. Now, one of those is for pedestrians and cars. You should look at that one. You could do it on that bridge. If all of a sudden the other people start to see opportunity, what adds the most value to Vancouver? What adds the most value to New Haven? When the DOTs start thinking that way, then it gives you more flexibility to do what you want to do.
And our conduct gave us an exception to do 9 feet, 10-inch lane widths, through lane widths.
Well,
Gave us
10 feet lane width.
9 feet, 10 inches.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to go out in the hallway. This room gets used in 15 minutes, so I think we can hang out in here for another 5 or 6 minutes for those of you who want to come up and talk. Mayor, thank you very much for
Good seeing
coming.
you.
And Anthony
Tony, good luck.
and Allison, great job.